Hey, if you like my videos, you might also like my comedy series YouTube Blue, which premieres every Saturday on the YouTube Blue YouTube channel. Go check out the link in the description and the card above to watch the latest episode. Now on with the video. Power Rangers Samurai premiered on Nickelodeon 10 years ago today. And that's a pretty big deal for me because Samurai was my first season and I loved watching it when I was little, but Samurai generally gets a pretty bad rep, and yeah, looking back it isn't very good. It's not the worst, but it's not that great either. But believe it or not, there's a pretty good reason for this. Here's the reason why Power Rangers Samurai was doomed from the start. But first, a very brief history of Power Rangers up until that point. Haim Saban was a musician turned music producer. In the late 70s, he realized that there is a big market in the entertainment industry for music produced for TV shows. In 1980, he and Shuki Levy formed Saban Productions, a music production company. By the mid-80s, Saban Productions had a pretty good working relationship with entertainment giant DiC Entertainment. They started co-producing some shows with them, and in 1988 they went all in on TV productions, restructuring Saban Productions as Saban Entertainment. In 1992 they helped produce the X-Men cartoon for Fox Kids, and after that they created Power Rangers, which was an instant hit. In 1996, due to Saban Entertainment's close working relationship with the Fox Children's Network, the company behind the Fox Kids programming block on Fox, they effectively merged. Together they formed Fox Kids Worldwide, which both the Fox Children's Network and Saban Entertainment became subsidiaries of. In 1997, they bought the Family Channel and rebranded it as the Fox Family Channel. But by the early 2000s, the channel wasn't doing so well. So in 2001, Disney bought Fox Kids Worldwide, which was now known as Fox Family Worldwide, and reorganized it. It became a subsidiary of ABC, was renamed to ABC Family Worldwide, Fox Children's Network was dissolved, the Fox Family Channel became ABC Family, and Saban Entertainment was rebranded as BVS Entertainment, becoming a subsidiary of Buena Vista Entertainment. A lot of people misconstrue this deal as Disney buying Power Rangers, but in fact buying Power Rangers was incidental. They didn't really have an interest in the show. Due to contractual reasons, they produced Power Rangers Wild Force, which had already been ordered, but after that they canceled the show and dissolved MMPR Productions, laying off everyone involved with the show. But then, Douglas Sloan, former Power Rangers writer and showrunner, who had worked at Disney since he left Saban, convinced them to pick the show up for another season, Power Rangers Ninja Storm. Ninja Storm was a success, and this ushered in the Disney era of Power Rangers. But by the time that Jungle Fury was happening, ratings had gotten so bad that it was planned to be the last season. However, the show was still doing well enough internationally for Jetix and Toon Disney to fund one more season, Power Rangers RPM. But once Jetix and Toon Disney fused into Disney XD, the show's fate was sealed and it was done. But then, in May 2010, Haim Saban announced three major things. 1. Haim Saban's investment group, the Saban Capital Group, had formed a new subsidiary, Saban Brands, which would act as the successor to Saban Entertainment producing TV shows. 2. Saban Brands had bought the rights for Power Rangers back from Disney. 3. Nickelodeon had picked up Power Rangers for another season to begin airing in 2011. Hope was back. But here's the thing. The way PR usually works is that a new season is announced sometime in March or April, with a showrunner and basic story already being in place by then. It may surprise you, but PR does a surprising amount of writing in pre-production. Most of the scripts for the first half are written before filming even begins. So then eventually the cast is announced in August or September, and filming begins ASAP, ideally in late summer, but usually sometime in early fall. Then the season premieres around February or March of the year after it was announced. But for Power Rangers Samurai, this is about what happened. In May, the concept of a new season of Power Rangers was announced. In September, the name Power Rangers Samurai and the cast were announced. Later, it was announced that filming had begun the past summer, and it premiered in February 2011. So yeah, if they started filming in the summer, say even August, they had about 3 months from announcing that there would be a new season to having a cast, showrunner, season selected, and filming started. Usually they have about double the time from announcement to filming, And at the time of announcement, they usually would already have a showrunner and basic story plotted out. So obviously the pre-production of Power Rangers Samurai, the time that stories are fleshed out, was pretty rushed. But it doesn't quite stop there. Not long after Saban Brands announced they were making a new season of Power Rangers, they had two main decisions to make. The first was what season they were adapting. Unlike previous seasons, due to the year-long gap between seasons, they could pick between two different Sentai seasons to adapt. There was Samurai Sentai Shinkenger, which had aired in 2009 while Power Rangers RPM was airing in the US, and Tensu Sentai Gozeiger, the Sentai season which was currently airing during development. They went with Shinkenger for two reasons. One was that given how much they would end up sticking to the source material, Shinkenger's samurai theme would be more marketable to American kids than Gozeiger's angel theme. The other reason, and probably the bigger one if I had to guess, was that Bandai America had already started working on a Shinkenger-based Power Rangers toy line before Saban announced it had been making a new season of Power Rangers. Bandai America is a very small company, and a lot of the market value they had was based around Power Rangers toys, so they were going to make some whether there was a show to promote them or not. So they were already preparing toys based on Shinkenger to arrive in stores in 2011. It would cost money to stop that and start working on Gozeiger toys, plus they'd probably come out late. Heck, I wouldn't be surprised if Bandai had actually come up with the name Power Rangers Samurai and started slapping a logo on their prototypes by the time Saban made their announcement. So Shinkenger was decided on. But now they needed a showrunner. The person they landed on was Jonathan Zakor. Jonathan Zakor had a long history with the franchise. He was a producer on the show since the beginning and had last worked on the show during Power Rangers Wild Force and was laid off like everyone else once it was over. Zakor was considered the showrunner during Wild Force because Chip Lin, who had been the showrunner effectively since In Space, left after Time Force. The dynamic between the creatives was much different in Time Force than in Wild Force. In Time Force, there was a showrunner/producer, Chip Lin, who was the creative engine of the show, while producers and executive producers like Zakor were above him and basically said yes or no. With Wild Force, Zakor was still a producer, but he was the final creative say on the show. But he did have somewhat of a second in command in story editor Amit Baumick. Wild Force was Amit Baumick's first season on the show, having been a fan of the show since its premiere. Zakor and Baumick had, let's just say, different outlooks on how Power Rangers should be produced. Zakor's perspective was essentially that Power Rangers was an American adaptation of Sentai, and as long as the Sentai they're adapting is good, they should just make an American version of that, only changing things if they aren't good or marketable in the US. This makes sense since this was definitely what the show was when it was first developed for Fox Kids when Jonathan Zakor was first hired onto the show. It's just that Zyurenja's story wasn't really marketable at all to kids in America, so they changed a lot of things about it. Amit Baumick, being a huge fan of the show and the process of making Power Rangers, saw Power Rangers as a show that used Sentai footage as a way to make the show cheaper to produce, but besides that, should be as original as possible. So, as you can probably guess, there were a lot of fights between the two. If you watch Wild Force, you'll notice that generally it's an American version of Gaoranger, the source material, with some original ideas thrown in. That's because Jonathan Zakor was the ultimate creative force on the show and wanted it to be American Gaoranger, with some of Amit Baumick's ideas coming through. So Zakor would end up being the showrunner of Power Rangers Samurai 2, but something you may not know is that Amit Baumick was also a contender for showrunner. If you search for it, you can pretty easily find his proposal for a Power Rangers Samurai, a very original adaptation of Shinkenger that I think could have worked. I'm not going to go far into detail on it just because of time, and that there's enough there for a whole other video, but I think it could have been great. But they turned him down and went with Zakor. Why? Well, they had so little time to develop the show before filming had to start that when Zakor basically said, let's just do Shinkenger, but maybe add Bulk and Skull in there. Wait, we can't get Jason Narvi? I'll figure it out. Saban saw it as a big win because they didn't need to develop all these new ideas, and I don't blame them. They had about 3 months to start filming for a show which they had next to no clue about the plot. Samurai is the only season of Power Rangers where there's an on-screen credit for the writer of the Japanese episode. Because basically, for Season 1 especially, Samurai didn't really have writers. They had translators and editors. They take the Shinkenger script, translate it to English, make it more American, add Bulk and Spike, and maybe make a few other adjustments before filming it. And part of the trouble in that is that they took a show that was all about Japanese culture and edited it to be more American. Only one of the Rangers was Asian. They basically whitewashed it. And so whether or not you liked Shinkenger, Samurai could only ever be a pale imitation of it. And that's why Samurai was doomed to fail from the beginning. There was no way to make the show in a way that wasn't just a washed out Shinkenger while also meeting the deadline for release. What do you think about Samurai? Personally, it's nostalgic enough that I can watch 1 or 2 episodes and enjoy it, though mostly I only watch it as background while I work. What about you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for daily videos on the franchises you love, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.